he, no, and I think that's something that he really kind of perhaps instilled in me or got me interested in, thinking about things a little differently or maybe way differently for a lot of people. I think it's something that's not appreciated in linguistics, but I mean, if that is what I could do in linguistics, I would do that. Yeah. But it's not academia for them.
Yeah.
Even though I would argue differently, right?
Yeah.
But I think doing that kind of stuff with my dad, it really brought me to think about this idea that you just hear people say it about how language and culture is tightly connected, interwoven, intertwined, like you can't separate them, right?
Yeah.
But something you don't see is an example of how they are tightly connected, right? Yeah. What you do see is a culture, and then you see it being, spoken about.
Yeah.
So I like to work towards actually seeing that intertwining where you really can't separate it.
So can you give an example of how you've seen it intertwine?
Well, one of the most recent thing that I've been working on is the structure of the Navajo verb and how that reflects the Navajo worldview. It's a binary model, and I think binary is universal. So it's kind of it turns out it's a very simple idea. Yeah. In fact, So what I do is I talk about, for example, like Mother Earth and Father Sky. So you see that as a pair, and in between the two, life exists, right? So I kind of take that idea. That's just one small thing of it. Take that idea and I talk about the formation of the verb and how we can look at that formation of the verb and kind of compare it and to see that verb build up.
Yeah.
Right? Because the Navajo verb is something that they say is very complex. It's hard to learn. Yeah. The verb changes form depending on what you're talking about, when it's happened, who's involved. So that's kind of the reputation of the Navajo verb, right? So I like to, instead of being influenced by all those kind of ideas, I think something like, if we were to think about it a little differently, like what would that be? And one of the ideas, and the idea for me that I talk about is, for example, the Navajo verb stem. Theoretically, it's composed of two units. It's a core and a suffix. So right away you have two parts, right? Or you could say you have Mother Earth and Father Sky. Yeah. But together, life exists. Yeah. And when you have that verb root and the suffix together, then we understand it. We understand what it means. But if you were to separate it, and I don't know how to separate it, but if it were separated and you only had one component, most likely you won't be able to understand that component without the other. Gotcha. And vice versa, right?
So one has to exist for the other to exist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm talking about is, it comes down to this idea of, and there's TED Talks about this as well. Like, does our environment shape our language, right? Or do the way we speak in shapes our environment? I think like how does our I think that's the thought there. Yeah, it's been a couple of years since I've worked on it. Yeah. But basically, what I propose is that our environment shapes our language. Yep. Based on the structure, right? If we were to take a look at the structure of the language.
While you're a professor at UNM, then were there a lot of traditional values you held on to? Because since you're teaching Dine Bizaad, was there like a criteria that you felt like you had to keep intact in order to properly teach it?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to work with Dine Bizaad, whether I'm a professor or not, that I should be culturally knowledgeable and understand that process as well as practice it.
Yeah.
I think it's important for me to be well nourished in that, in you know, in the way of knowing in life,
Yep.
right? Because it enhances me as an individual,
Yeah.
and you know, and then you're able to answer those challenging questions, right? You know, no, I think Navajo culture has to be part of Navajo culture and knowledge. Has to be part of my dish, right? My medicine bundle as a professor of Navajo linguistics, a professor of linguistics who works with the Dine Bizaad. I feel like I have to speak the language as well. I think that's a big strength for me. Everything that I'm talking about, I think it's a big strength for me that I have that helps me in this field.
You would bring this up to academia and use Navajo culture as part of your basis for all this. Has there been any pushback as far as like this doesn't fall into it? Is there like a certain template?
Well, it's referred to as, I think, ethnolinguistics.
Ethnolinguistics?
Yeah, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's great and stuff, but it kind of downgrades that area of interest because you've added ethno to it.
What I meant was if you are bringing in Navajo tradition into your teachings, but when it's part of the curriculum and you add the word ethno to it, does it diminish the Navajo part of it at all, or no?
No. Well, I think so. I think it does.
Yeah.
It just it devalues it some, right?
Yeah.
And it also gives it a label of this idea, this thought is not as valuable as linguistics. It's fun for me to think about Navajo language and structure.
Yeah.
And to try to find ways to talk about it using Navajo culture, the Nick culture.
Yeah.
And it also requires a great deal of knowledge. And I don't have all the knowledge, you know. I work with what I know. Yeah. And there's more things to learn. And this is where I miss my dad, right? Yeah. Like I'm like, Dad, I know there's something, it has to be, you know, and I'll show something to him and then we'll talk about some different things. Yeah. And then he'll make some suggestions or he'll tell me different things. And then from there, I'll work it out. Yeah. And I don't have that person anymore. Like I don't know, you know, I don't know anyone to work with. I think like it'd be great to work with some medicine man or some people who have that knowledge and just kind of, I guess collaborate is a word.
Yeah, no, that's a really good word for it.
To think about these things. Yeah. In some of my Navajo classes, you know what they call linguistics? Sadnala. Butchering the language. Yeah, and wow. I was like, I don't think I do that. You know, we take it apart, but you know, you always put it back together. Yeah. So I mean, that's what generally some people think, right, of this area of linguistics. Yeah. I don't think Navajo has adjectives. Adjectives are verbs, right? So things like colors, smooth, rough. Those are verbs because you can say, I'm red, right?
Yeah.
So Chee, but you can say this is red, this thing, the Chee, and that's what's used for color. So I think a lot of those belong to the verb category. And also I think because linguistics isn't really straightforward for me or really easy for me because of how English categorizes English language.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we've taken Navajo and it's kind of been they try to make it equivalent. And as a young person who spoke Navajo, I never quite grasped the idea of adjectives, because these are things that, I mean, like colors, smooth, what else did I say? There's a whole bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
And to me, they were always like, but aren't they like verbs?
Yeah.
And so, but as I think as I took a linguistics class and I got older and probably lived more in the world, I started to understand things a lot better.
So do you have always 100% Navajo students in your class?
No, I get non-Navajo students in my class.
What's the ratio on that?
The classes I teach, I get very few students. So one of my goals is to kind of, increase my student enrollment for my classes, because my classes are a bit specialized, and the concepts that we teach it's basically linguistics for Navajo, and it can be complex for some people.
Yeah.
Some people like it,
Yeah.
But because that it can be complex for people, I try to find ways to talk about those concepts, but bringing in something that I hope they can connect with, which is, Dine thought, right? Or Dine culture, or some knowledge, and try to enhance it with that to get them to understand the different parts, of the structure of the language.
UNM also has the UNM Rainforest, and they dedicated 2 floors or 3 floors to Navajo Nation kids. Because of that, have you seen an increase in enrollment in your classes?
I think I got to UNM the last 2 years of that.
Oh, so it doesn't
I
exist anymore?
think, yeah.
Oh,
I'm not very familiar with how it impacted the enrollment.
Yeah.
But I think when the rainforest thing was because of the former Navajo Nation president Russell B. Gay, right? From what I understand, and then Nez became president, and I think it went away then.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Oh, is it a bummer?
I think so. Imagine, you going to school or me going to school and having to live in such a really nice dorm. It is nice. I've been up there, and they said at the time, students said they were paying $200 a month, and those were some very nice apartments. Yeah. I don't know if it's still there. I thought I read in the Navajo Times or something that they didn't renew those contracts.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
That's a good wait, because I know that.
But I'm not sure though. I probably have to look it up.
All right, Jamie, we're gonna have to fact check that.
Yeah, I'm not sure though, but I think yeah. So when I graduated from UNM, I got a job offer at the University of Alberta in Canada, and so I took the job because UNM couldn't hire me. That's a policy, right? You can't hire your own graduates. Oh. So, and so anyway, so I went up to Alberta, and you literally have to carry your diploma across. So I took that thing with me, that big diploma, on the plane, and I presented it there at customs. And they looked at it and they let me in.
That's insane.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Really? I have to bring the diploma? And they said yes. And I was like, okay, well, I'm like, it's huge, but I'll bring it. And I traveled with it. One of the other funny things that happened there was when we did some other customs things. I don't remember what it was exactly, but the custom agent, she was like, you are now a settler of Canada. And I'm like, looking at her like,
what?
I just shut up. I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm in Canada. I'll probably go to prison for opening my mouth.
Yeah.
Being native and
Native
female.
and a female, and
Yeah.
they don't know how ruthless Canada is.
Oh no. I learned. I never thought of that country like that, and I've experienced some things there that I was not familiar with, and I was questioning things like, what is that? And I thought, am I being oversensitive? I don't think I'm an oversensitive person.
Well, you're in a Marine, so.
Yeah. And so I was kind of like, what is that, what is going on? I never quite understood it.
Yeah.
But thankfully, a job opened up here at UNM, so I applied and I came back.
Grab your diploma and came
Yeah,
back.
so I was like, all right, let's go back. Let's go home. I was like, let's go home and hopefully I retire from here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I really hope you do.
So myself and Dr. Lee joined a group in the effort, and we helped, we helped them, we helped with it. So we have, and then Dr. Lee also brought on one of her students, Cheryl Yazzie. And, together we worked on opening up this language nest called Salik Idilia that's now here in Albuquerque. And that's just to immerse, urban Navajos, urban children, Navajo children, in Dine Bizaad.
Okay.
So it's actually huge. It's a huge program.
And where's it located?
It's located here in town on Candelaria Street.
Okay.
Yeah. And, we have plans for it to grow. We want it to grow. We want it to get bigger. We want it to really, right now I think we're really working on solidifying it so that it becomes a strong center before we expand. So that's one of the projects that I've worked on here in Albuquerque, for the community and doing the job that I do in linguistics. But yeah, I think child language research is,
It's the future.
it's the future, it's important. You have to commit to a certain amount of language classes. You have to commit to participating in some of the presentations that they bring. So there's a lot of cultural presentations that's brought to the family.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is for families to learn the Dine knowledge, the Dine practices, so that they can start incorporating it into their own lives and turn around and support their child and bring them up with this knowledge and language together. There's a lot of workshops, maybe training. There's a lot of presentations for them to participate in.
Oh, and that's freaking great. And
Yeah.
also, does that also apply to you to be full-blooded Dine, or
No.
or is it is it open? Is
It's
it open
open.
to general ethnic groups? I guess that's.
I think so. I think it's open to anyone.
Yeah.
As long as you're committed to learning, as long as the family is committed to learning themselves. Because the idea behind that is they're in this nest where they're immersed in Navajo, in Dine Bizaad, right? But and that's only 4-6 hours a day, depending on how long the child is there.
Yeah.
But once they're outside of that nest, what are we exposed to? It's not Navajo, right?
Yep.
So it's English. Everywhere you go in the city of Albuquerque is English. What we primarily hear, radio station, TV, Netflix, everything.
Yep.
Families visiting, nowadays a lot of families no longer speak their heritage language. So if they come and visit the newborn baby and play with them, it's most likely happening in English.
Yeah.
So it's just a huge giant. I'm gonna turn this off now. I think I'm warmed up.
And that's the modern Hawaiian, everybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to chop woods.
You know to hauling it in.
We had my ceremony at my Shimasana Bagare at my grandmother's house, and I remember one of the things that happened was, I don't know if everyone has this, but my grandmother had a tlisi that this goat that just kind of shuffled around, that was just hung out wherever, you know. And so all night, my Nelly lady kept saying, "Watch out for that goat! Watch out for that!" That goat fell in my cake, and they had to pull it out. Like early in the morning, you know, it just like fell in there, and someone discovered it or something. And they pulled it out, and yeah, even when I was like in my 40s, my dad mentioned it again, and he was talking about it. I think it really bothered him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because it's supposed to be untouched, and then you pull
Yeah.
back all the husk and everything, and you're supposed to be the one to cut the cake.
yeah, it didn't damage the cake itself,
Oh, it
right?
didn't?
It
Oh.
just, you know, I think the cake was already like firmed up and it cooked,
Oh, gotcha.
right? And it
gotcha.
just kind of fell into like the fire pit. That poor thing died afterwards, but but it always bothered my dad, and he mentioned it when I was 40, and he was talking, and I'm looking at I was like, "Dad, I'm not doing a kinalta again at 40."
He's like, just that one night. come
Yeah,
on."
yeah. I was like, I don't want to do another kid. And he's looking at me laughing. I go, "Is that what you're talking about?" He's just laughing. I was just like, "No, I'm not doing that." But yeah, I was really young, but some of the things I remember from there, I feel like it's different from today.
How was
Like
that?
in the last couple of years, I swear I had, like, my Nelly lady, like, one of the things they say is don't scratch yourself. But my Nelly lady gave me something to scratch myself with if I needed to. And I can't remember what it was, right? I think it was a claw. Was it a crow claw? It might, you know, I
Those
think
goggy ones?
yeah.
I don't know.
But-
I never heard about using the claw to scratch yourself.
See, that's today,
Yeah.
right? But back then it was, she tied one on me to scratch myself, yeah.
Because you're not really scratching yourself, because it's the...
Because it's a claw, I
Yeah, 'cause
think.
it's a claw.
Yeah. But yeah, my memories from my childhood growing up in Round Rock is all with my paternal grandmother, my Nelly lady. Yeah, like everything from we would have to go walk down into the wash and get some chiz to stay warm for the day. So you go down there, you know, a few times every day. There's a biko, there's a big old canyon down there where we used to play. I grew up playing down there with my cousins. Grew up, you know, bringing, you know, helping my Nelly lady get chiz. And then there's another canyon that's south of them, way over here. To that canyon, we used to go over there and do like pick chichin, pick those berries, make gud out there. There's a lot of rock. I don't know what you call this thing, but there's just a lot of rock on the ground, like flat rock on the ground. Then there's holes made by the rain, by water.
Oh, is it like flagstones?
I think so. I don't know what they're called, right? But yeah. And she would say, we'd be like, "Oh, you know, if you're thirsty, you just drink from one of the holes that had water,
Yeah.
right? But if there was some bubbles in it," she said, "No, don't drink from that. The coyotes probably drink from that one. Drink from something else." You know, things like that, right? Making gut, you know, that gut for blue corn mush. We used to go out there and make that way out there, and then bring it back home. Picking. Oh, and then north of where she lived, we picked a lot of those root type of foods, like
Like carrots and
yeah, like the carrots,
wild onions.
the wild onions, yeah, like the chasht eji, ochin, yeah, azale, yeah. Yeah, there's like different foods that we used to pick there. So I grew up doing a lot of that with her. And then walking down to the toilwada, to the well, where you have to pump it and bring in back water as well. And yeah, and then I also remember that she had a hogan where we slept on sheepskin, dirt, you know, your traditional home, right?
Yeah.
Sheepskin and on the dirt floor,
Yep.
and then she put her blanket on you. You know, so kind of growing up and becoming an adult, and then being in boarding school. Like I went to boarding school at Rock Point. I went to boarding school at Navajo Academy, and then in the military. So I've been on twin-size beds for a big portion of my life. So once I became able to afford it, I bought myself a California king bed and I've had that for a while. And people be like, "Why do you like sleep in this big old bed by yourself?" Because I deserve it. I've slept on a twin-size bed for so long.
You know how many decades I spent on
Yeah, I'm going to go for the biggest thing available right out there, and that's what I'm going to sleep on. And right, when you were on that long walk trail, if you were sick, if you couldn't make it, they killed you.
Yeah.
If you were old.
How am I going to honor them?
Right. Yeah.
And it's this.
I think the same thing too.
Yeah,
I always think about that lady, that sick, sister. And in the process, I lost a lot of vision.
Yeah.
I have no peripheral vision.